Hey guys, this is Mikro. I'm back with another video. I'm starting to do a thing where I post polls after I post these videos every day for whatever video you guys want to see next, and I'll either do like one or two of these depending on how tired I am the next day and like how many wars are going on and whatnot. So you guys voted? Do you guys want the attack strats that are more advanced for Fort? So I'm going to be doing that, and after this, if I'm not super tired, I'll see if I want to do one of these either IGVG or IGBB guides. So yeah, look out for that. If you want to figure out like what you want me to talk about, then I'll post some things on that and I'll take into consideration stuff in the comments too. So, yep. So hopping into this, attack, at this point in the game is like fairly, I don't want to say straightforward, but if you're not getting into fort within 10 to 15 minutes, you generally have some big problems to fill. I don't think companies tend to hold outside super well anymore. The people are just too competent about living on attack, and if you live on attack, you just have respawn advantage, and then you just tend to win points off of that alone. But the basic advanced concepts. Okay, the advanced concept of attack is instead of throwing people at a death ball, you either do like a quadrant system, like EU is running, and the other thing that is really good is overloading points, and then also making areas less overloaded so that your decks can get more value, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is Dex players tend to do better in small skirmishes, so if you put them in spots where they can take those duels, then they'll tend to do better, and normal groups tend to do better in bigger balls. So you want to try to cater to both, as well as defenders have to defend all 5 gates, but as an attacker, you don't have to choose to attack all 5 gates. So if you're able to be in a spot where you're able to, say, attack 2 to 3 of those gates, and then from there, kind of converge on the same point, you tend to get more value. But I'm going to step through this. I have wrote up a quick guide, and then I'll walk through everything that you do on attack. So in fort, there's like a checklist I have. Actually, I'll go back to this after I get to the in fort part in this. But generally on an attack, there's a free point, and then there's a not free point, and then there's like a main point. You could either send multiple people to free points at the start, or you like send your ball to a free point, or you could do like a soft contest in a free point. This kind of depends on who you're against and what meta you're in. On EU, it's very common to send your entire ball that an NA would send to B because B is the closest to the spawn, to a side point, and then kind of hide 10 people, get your ults off the dummies, and then send those 10 people to a side point so that you are able to like cap C, and then this big group's able to rotate to B. And then you have this like side contest going. So in essence, they're kind of wasting time at the beginning to save time later. I think that's a solid strategy outside. The thing that NA tends to do is tends to just swarm B. You go for the free point with 10 people. Usually you're able to get it with 10 people, and then once those 10 people cap, you're in a spot where usually there's a major rotation that happens. The map is usually flipped. People try to hard contest the side point because side point tends to be harder to take last than B point. I don't know if that is completely true anymore, but believe it enough to say it. There are some people who will purposely save B point for last. It is a little bit easier to recontest, but it's also really easy to attack because the respawn's really close. C is either way, whatever point is last. If you lose momentum on it, it's very hard to recapture space. And I think that one thing that really helps attackers is attackers have been tending to slam one side of the point really hard and leave the other sides open, so defenders play more static typically, which doesn't work as well. So you kind of want to ball up more and like overload one side typically, if you're on attack. That's a way to take advantage of defenders. So when you're doing this sort of split, that's why I have people overloading this like outside point side. The reason why you would overload this side and not the far side is because if you wanted to rotate to B, like say they over rotate to C, then you can easily do that, and they have to run through you in order to get over to B if B starts ticking. So that it typically puts B in an advantage. For this situation, I'm just gonna kind of breeze through the point phase because this should be fairly simple at this point. The base idea is you want to rotate between what point you're contesting. You want kind of dual pressure on both. If they over rotate to one point and you're able to live long enough, the other point should be capped basically for free, which is what I say here. Say you cap B for free. basically, because your respawns go there, and then you go to C, and this is where you have like a big fight. This is where it's really important to try to clear out one side of point so that your healers can get set up and can be free casting. If your healers are free casting, then they can support people who are on point and your balls more. You don't have to worry about them dying, and then that just makes it really a lot easier to go in effectively. So as long as you're able to stabilize and able to like kind of push them into one part of the point, then you should be able to get a lot of value and be able to clean up C without too many problems. Or if you're on B, you could do something similar and just overload one half of the point and not worry about the other half as much. The big thing is you want to kill them and you want to live, and if you have numbers, that tends to be a little bit easier, especially because people don't really count as much in wars, and it's hard to kite. So say you get to the fort. This is where I'm starting to go into some advanced stuff, so I'm gonna bring up the quick checklist. So before this was like a pretty standard attack strat. There's like the EU thing where you split if you want to early, farm ults off dummies, and then go to the other side and just have like kind of two big fights before you get to fort. Where the NA strat is basically you end up with like one big 50v50 because of the way the splits work before you get to fort. But there's merit to both. When you get to fort, though, in both cases, in EU and NA, it's been about 15 minutes to 20 minutes is typical to get into fort and for a decently competitive war. The first thing you want to do, in my opinion, is break horns. A lot of people, or sorry, break doors. Some people have the opinion to break horns. The reason why I think breaking doors is better is if you break doors, it forces the defenders to kind of come inside a little bit more because they're like worried about you doing things, and then they can't take the fight with the horns as much. I think you just strictly ignore defenders and break doors is generally better than breaking horns. And if the defenders spend time to repair those doors, they're just wasting parts and they can't do as many creative plays later, which I've talked about in other videos, but I don't think it's really good for repair people to be repairing gates as much, and it's better just to use it to stop tempo. So I would break doors first and then break horns, and you want to break every single horn. I have single-handedly won wars versus like the best companies in NA just because they would not break one horn and I would repair it, and I would blow that horn when there's like 8 or 7 minutes left, and they would not be able to win an attack just because I had that horn up, and they're not able to get a queen attack until they have like 6 or 7 minutes left. So they basically just don't have time to really get a queen attack off in a fort. So it's really important to break every horn and not waste time on that. You should be able to get every single horn down in approximately like 3 to 4 minutes if you do this well. Even faster if you are doing good, if you're slotting a good amount of ice gauntlets, a good amount of decks who know what they're doing. Like with Ice Gauntlet on attack, it's really strong to run Ruinous in an Ice Gauntlet, and if you're not running that, you're being a little bit greedy. And you could use that to better break horns, since ice damage is super effective versus horns, and ice damage and Ice Gauntlet has good range as well as extra damage if targets are a certain amount of distance away, and some other nice perks. So after you break horns, the biggest thing is trying to take control of half of the fort. What I mean by that is you want to try to overload one gate. So this is what this picture is trying to show. As you usually go from here, you break all your horns, you get rid of the siege, which I don't really have a slide for, and then you get to your gates. And this is like where people tend to overload one gate, and this tends to work out pretty well, and then you just stack people on that gate. The reason why you do that is because on A, there's typically 10 to 15 people defending it. On D, there's typically 10 to 15 people defending it. So if you're able to send 40 people to both those gates and then just leave a little bit on the sides, then it's really strong. The other thing that a lot of people are worried about is like, oh, what if they repair C? What if they repair E? If they repair both of those or either one of those early, it doesn't matter. And melees could help breaking repairs on C and E. And on E, Dex is going to be there typically, and it's like really easy for Dex to break things. One thing I have done with this is I assumed 1 and 2 are deady point. I think there is an argument or the way that we build our deady points now is we put bruisers in our deady point team, so I didn't separate them. But if you're playing like a way that does not have bruisers in your deady point squad anymore, then you want to probably put like a bruiser group on B, because bruisers tend to be very, very strong versus deady point players, because deady point players don't contribute a lot of pressure, but bruisers do. So that will help your B group win more, and also help your A group get in more if your A group is a little bit tankier. So in any case, you want to really crash through A and try to fight in this like initial zone. Another mistake a lot of people make on attack is they leave their healers out to dry and Dex just farm them. You really, really want to have anti-kill squad on the side that you're overloading. This is a mistake that we took advantage against Supple because they were not protecting their healers, and our decks were a lot better than their decks, and we had more of our decks. So they would push through on A and like D and B at the same time, try to get in the same spot, but then we would jump behind and kill their healers, so then everyone that was on A would just die, or they would be busy trying to run away from the kill squad, and Supple would not peel. So it's like little things like that that make a really, really big difference. So if you have BBIGs and bows in your backline really protecting people and great sword hatchets, then that will really help you get through the gate a lot cleaner. And if your healers are alive, you will stay alive on like the front part of point as long as you're running somewhat meta specs with a lot of uh shirking fort and freedom and stone form is the big thing. So if you're able to get together and kind of congregate on one part of the point, this is like the part where you try to take that, you're probably going to lose like 20, 30 people most likely and only have like 10 to 15 survive. And those 10 to 15 need to get up top and live. What this does is it makes it so that the defenders on their respawns will try to contest you up top, and that makes it really easy to crash back through the gate, so you're able to kind of have that fight again. But this time you have people up top, and they're more up top, which means more people on your side will live because they're running into less people in the fort itself. And then while this is happening, usually you have people that are like lighter and squishier sneak through the more open spaces. So this is the part where I said was alluding to earlier, where I said, hey, you want to put your decks on spots so that it's less contested. If you leave Seagate open, it's really easy for decks to get through that. Like for example, a lot of people like to send decks through the back gate. Being someone that has played in the back gate, I think that's the stupidest decision you could ever make to send decks through the back gate, strictly because that is the longest choke in the game to like run through this, run around, and go up these stairs. It is like just asking to be killed. And if you play more on C with the decks and you're taking a 5v5, you're actually going to be able to pressure out the healer, and the melees are going to have to run away, and you're going to be able to get through for free. So I think that makes a lot more sense to play on C for decks or something a little bit more split, and then send ball groups through the back gates, and then have your some decks people just soft contest people that are trying to contest your backline and help with the actual crash through the gate itself. That ranged pressure will help open up space and allow your bruisers to help takes that space. And as long as their healers are alive and well supported, you're going to be able to do things with that pressure. So that's going back to the congregating up top. This is the slide I have for congregating up top. A lot of people make the mistake also of congregating above this like D area or above this E area up top. That's bad because it could be easily flanked. The best spot to hold up top is right above the stairs on B on either one of those sides. The reason why is there's one staircase that's super, super close, but if bruisers come up this staircase and healers try to follow them, they won't be into heal LOS range, meaning that they'll get forced out. And if they come to a different staircase, it's going to take longer to run. So they'll typically come up that close staircase, and as long as you take the fight near that staircase, you'll have the healer advantage, and you'll be able to win that, typically. So I would recommend doing that. And then if they do like hard commit and then they leave the B gate like exposed, then you want to drop down the B gate. You want to do the same thing I talked about earlier, where you want to like kind of spread out and zone half the fort. And here, from this point, you're just trying to get kills, but the most important thing is staying alive. Because if you get like 10 kills, but you also die 10 times, defenders will win that. If you get 10 kills but die 5 times, defenders will also probably win that. You need to get like 10 to 20 kills and then only have like maybe 5 people die. And then you have an actual good chance at winning in the fort. And when that happens, you need to have Deady Point go, usually as early as, or as soon as you have some sort of tempo in the fort, Deady Point needs to go tick. If they go early, they will die. If they go on tempo with the team, they will get a lot of value. And then you want to try to kill respawns with some groups. Typically, this is a melee group, and then I think you have ranged people trying to protect your healers as well as trying to harass their healers. And then at that point, you're just kind of killing respawns, and then you're all inning, assuming you did this right, and you're up advantage when you actually go through. If you try to rush these steps, sometimes it can work. Other times, it typically, and what typically happens is it just leads to people just dying super, super fast. The other thing that's really important is between these steps, there is time where people can get off repairs. At this point, like once you're on to like step 6 in a fort, it does not really matter if E gate or D gate get repaired. It does not really matter if C gate or A gate get repaired either. The only thing that really matters is the B gate that gets repaired. From experience, range can't protect against B gate getting repaired, but the best thing to protect against B gate getting repaired is a heavy BB. heavy BBs with a healer pocket that is supported by range tend to be able to prevent anyone from repairing that gate. And B gate is the gate that carries from the repair point of view the most. So if you're actually the biggest thing is like between the step 5 and step 6. Like you want to overload a side, pick your side. Don't do the same thing every single time, obviously. Typically, it is best to overload like one of these sides and end up on the C point or on the A point. B gate won't realistically be able to push through super, super hard, but they'll be able to maintain pressure. And even if they're like able to go near point while you guys are getting through, that could be very, very good. And there's some other strats I did not put on here that I will talk about now. Um, Other things that are like more advanced. So this concept I have at the beginning here, where it's like you kind of get spread out and then you end up on one gate. There are rotations that some companies have been doing, but I'd argue that they've been doing them completely wrong. One thing that Boogaflu likes to do a lot in NA is they'll stack a B gate heavy. They'll either crash through B gate, which is a fine plan, or they'll rotate off the B gate towards a side gate. The problem with rotating from B to A is it's a really long offensive rotation because this like walk around the B is like very, very long, and they typically don't do it with haste pots for some reason. If you do something that with haste pots, it can be okay, but what I would argue is it's better to start A and then rotate to B than it is to rotate B, start B and rotate to A. The reason for that is the LOS from the defenders. Defenders are typically not standing on this like right part of A, so they can't actually see that rotation to B as easy as it is for people to see the rotation going from B to A, if that makes sense. And the thing about rotations is they only work because the offenders have a closer run. You have to make them work by abusing line of sight, and the best way to abuse line of sight is to going from A to B. I think if you're going to go from B to A better rotation is a rotation bait. And what a rotation bait is it's just you do half a rotation, you walk out of LOS, you stand there for a few seconds so they think they're going all the way, and then you come back. So it's really easy to do that like a fake rotation from C to E, for example, and come back to C. Especially if you fool them into thinking you're going there by like really telegraphing it and then could just come back, or doing a like a fake rotation from B to A. It's a little harder to do it from A to B, but like a fake rotation here. But the idea is you're just trying to overload a gate, but you're trying to mix up which gate you're overloading. You could also choose to not overload gates, and that's fine at times. It will give your team more space, but then your decks need to figure out how to get through. If you do not want to overload gates, this typically is better for teams that have less decks, and then you can just basically plow your way through B, A, and C. I would make sure to stack more numbers on B if you're going to overload. If you're not going to overload gates, because B is a wider choke and it makes it easier for people to get in typically. Like I would do 4 groups on B, and then I would do like maybe 3 groups on C, and like 1 or 2 on A, and then maybe one in the back gate or 2 in the back gate for that sort of strategy, and still have those people in the back gate trying to end up supporting one of these gates getting through, and that gate getting through tries to support the back gate as well. But those are the main concepts, is just kind of overloading the gates, overloading B with melees. There's not a ton more advanced stuff than that, to be honest. Like a lot of this kind of comes down to the early steps here. You want to break the doors, break the horns, get control up top, live up top, and then kind of crash with your respawns on top of a gate. The getting up top has been less popular because mostly because people have been messing up the respawn crash phase. If you get up top right like if you get up top at the wrong time and the respawns catch a long time, your shot caller's like, wait, we need to wait 50 seconds. Like that's going to be too long. This needs to be like a 20 to 30-second thing, tops a minute. Otherwise, the people up top will just die. And if you see people on the defense getting up top as an attacker, you need to be thinking, I need to go through as soon as possible to alleviate pressure from the people up top. And one of the best ways to do that is to start taking on point. So if people go up top early for some reason and you're on B and you're able to start taking point, that's going to alleviate a lot of pressure up top, and it's going to split a lot of people, and it's going to help people up top get more value. But again, the best spot to hold is right above these stairs. If you play in these long areas, it's going to be really easy for healers to live, to get up top, and to use that LOS. The biggest advantage you have up top is abusing the fact that defenders' healers will have bad LOS of their bruisers and will not be able to hold space up top very easily. So you really want to pressure the healers out as your main priority. And as long as the healers can't heal the bruisers, you will win those fights as long as your healers are up top. The other thing that's noteworthy is you can't unstuck to get up top. There are a lot of servers where this is sort of taboo and not liked. But end of the day, it is a mechanic, and considering it's been a game in a long time, it's not unfair to say that it can be used in a war. So if you say hop down and get forced off this high ground and then you unstuck and end up back up there, in my opinion, that's fair game at this point because it's been in the game for so long. Other people's opinions is not, but my definition of an exploit is basically something that the devs have not known about and said they're going to patch and just haven't patched, or something that has like not been uh basically if people know about it and the devs know about it and they haven't fixed it, I would consider it to not be an exploit. I think it's easier to define it that way. So I'd say that's like fair game at this point, but it is a little bit scummy. So just depending on like who you are against and the people on your server and how they think about that, maybe choose not to do that at times. But there's definitely a strategy as well. I think that's the biggest thing. There are like some things like here where you could overload a side. Some people have a strat where it's like, hey, maybe we want to like kind of all in on these two respawns, kill these, and then go point, and then people on defense will try to hold the respawns, and like that's a big concept. But from an attacker point of view, as long as you overload one side, stuff tends to be very easily. If you spread out and slowly die, then that's generally worse. But if you kind of ball up, from my experience, stuff tends to be better. The biggest thing is in fort is making sure that your healers are in a safe spot to freely cast and to contest people that are going to be contesting your healers, and to try to contest the enemy healers as much as possible. Because if you're on their healers and they're not healing the bruisers, their bruisers are dying. If you're on the healers and the bruisers are on you, then you're still in a good spot because their healers will be dying. If the healers choose not to heal themselves and are healing the bruisers, you're on the healers will die. So it's like very easy to put them in a predicament where it's like a lose-lose situation as long as you go for the healers and protect your healers. So yeah, I think that's the main things. Just try to get in and live is the biggest step. And for a lot of people, just simply cannot get in and live. And if you're in a spot where you're really struggling to get in and live, considering running a higher armor weight. A lot of the solutions that have been done in EU is just swapping everyone from light to medium armor, even though they're looking to nerf medium armor in the upcoming patch, which is kind of funny. Most people in EU are running medium armor at this point, so it doesn't even like apply to them. But medium really helps you get in and live. Personally, for me, I've even gone further, and I've been like, I don't really care about medium. I want to run heavy because I prefer to not just use my stam off cooldown, but to use my stam to dodge like key abilities like shockwaves and grav wolves, and just take normal damage into my health bar, which heavy lets me live better. But you can't do that in every class. It's like a support option and maybe a melee option, but not widely useful for a melee. It's mostly like an IGVG thing that it's good for, and an IGBB thing that it's good for, and those sort of like more tanky point builds. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. I will put out another poll after this video to do tomorrow, and I will see you guys then.